Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to start looking at JSP beans. So beans are a mechanism for sharing data between your JSP pages basically, and let's start off by looking at a really simple example of a bean. So I'm going to create a new Java file here. So I'm going to go to new class. So this is not a servlet, it's just a class, and I'm going to call it user. So it could be called anything, but let's have a bean called user, and the idea is that this bean could maybe store information about the user. And I'll put it in a package called beans, which is a logical place to put it, but that doesn't matter. And I'm going to click finish. And the idea with beans is that they store properties, and the properties just correspond to your instance variables basically. So let's give this a couple of instance variables that we might want to store. I'll give it a private string. Let's say we want to store the email address of the user, and let's say we maybe want to store a password as well. So these are both strings, but you can use whatever types you like. And a bean, aside from its properties, has to have get and set methods in the standard format, and the standard format is the format that your get and set methods are generated in if you generate them automatically with your IDE. So let's do that here. I'm going to right click and go to source, and I'm going to go to generate getters and setters, tick email and password, and here we go. And I'll just do Control Shift and then F to format my code a bit in Eclipse. Now you notice the important thing is, so you've got some properties, and then you've got get methods and set methods, and these methods start with a lowercase letter, as all methods should, apart from of course constructors, and the first letter of the corresponding properties, the instance variables, are capitalized. So these are kind of standard, this is a kind of standard way of implementing get and set methods anyway, but it's particularly important that you get this right to have a bean, and that's kind of what makes this a bean, that it's got these properties and these get and set methods. So nothing too fancy there, and let's create a few JSPs. So in fact I'll create a JSP here, and I'll call it, let's call it set bean, like this, and click finish. So that's created set bean.jsp, and I'm also going to create one called get bean.jsp. Now in my set bean.jsp, I'm going to put in here a JSP bean tag, which looks like this. So I have JSP and use bean, and now I need to give the bean an ID, and I'll use the ID to refer to it again later. So here I'm just going to call it user with lowercase, but again this is just something I've literally just made up. It doesn't correspond to anything else that we've got at the moment. And I also need to tell this bean what class to use, so I'm going to say class equals, and I haven't imported the package here, so I need to say beans dot user, so that's the name of the class. And finally I need to tell this bean what its scope is, and we're going to look at scope a bit more later, but for now I'm going to say scope equals session, which as we'll see later on, that roughly corresponds to a person, or it could be multiple people using their internet browser in kind of one session. Now I've got this bean, so I've kind of defined this bean, or I've said I want to use this bean on this page, and now I can set properties on that bean, and the properties are basically the instance variables here, email and password in this case, that I've provided get and set methods for. And to set a property on a bean, I use the JSP set property tag. And the set property tag, firstly I need to tell it what bean to use. I need to give it a name, and this name corresponds to the ID that you set here in your use bean. So I'm going to say user here, and I'm going to need to specify the property that I need to set property, and I can choose, of course, from let's just take a look at the bean again. I can choose from email or password. So let's say that I want to set the email address, and this could be the email address of that a user has used to register in a form, for example. And we're going to look at how to handle forms with beans later on. And then finally here, I'm going to just specify, I'm just going to hard code a value just to get us started, and I'm going to say here just my email address, john@caveofprogramming.com. So I've created my bean here, this class. I've said use the bean on the JSP page, and I've set a property on that bean. And of course I could also set the I also have here a password property. In fact, why not do that here, just to make it clear that we can set more than one property. Let's change this to password, and let's change this to the highly secure let me in for a password. And now I'm going to go to another JSP page, completely separate page. Let's just take a look at this thing here. The local variable user is never read. I think that's just playing me false there. Let's go to get bean, and I'm going to copy this bean declaration here, and I'm going to go to get bean, and I'm going to paste it in here. So I'm also using the bean here with the scope session, same class. And now I'm going to retrieve that property using that bean. And just to display it, I'm going to use an expression tag here, and I'm just going to say user dot get email. And since I set the let's say email here, since I set the password as well, I could also display that. Oh yeah, and because it's an expression tag, no semicolon. And let's just put a self-contained paragraph tag here and say password colon, and let's have another expression tag. So this here is actually this ID here. It's not the name of the class or anything. The name of the class is user with uppercase U. So here I'll say get password. So here I'm literally, really, it's as if I'm using the class. It said that this ID here is this. Now let's take a look at that working. So now if let's go to my browser here. So in fact I'll run this in Eclipse first. Let's go to set bean and click run, so we can see this running and get the URL. And I want to go initially to get bean in my Google browser. So I'm showing you this in a normal browser just to kind of underline how this works. And you can see some stuff there, but I'm going to explain that in a second. Let's go to a proper browser, and I'm going to go to get bean to start with. So I've started a new browser window here, which means I've got what we call a new session, a new browsing session. And if I hit return here, you can see that the email and password is null. And that's so I'm using the bean in my get bean, but they're not defined yet. And to define them, the set bean page actually sets values for that bean. So let's go back again, and let's go to set bean here. No output there because I didn't put any kind of output text in this set bean. And let's go back to get bean now, and you can see get bean now can use the bean. It's got the values. Get bean has got the values from the bean that was set in set bean. So you can see basically that the idea of a bean is it's really just a simple class that has some properties, and using this kind of syntax you can set those properties, and using this kind of syntax you can get those properties, and wherever you use the bean you just have this JSP use bean statement. You can't use JSP beans in servlets, but there are other ways of doing this kind of thing in servlets, and we're going to look at that in the future. But that's it for this tutorial, and until next time, happy coding.